Hello, YouTube, and welcome to Dark Tower Palaver. We are here for episode 148. I'll get into all the details here shortly, of course. Let me see. Let me just make sure everything is set up right. Going in 1 second. Let me just check one setting. Yep, all right. Making sure it was showing right. Okay, nobody's in the chat yet. It's all right. But here, starting into the lovely month of March, we have the March Insanity Tournament going. In fact, the first round ended just today. We'll be talking about that in the Palaver section. But let me go ahead and hit the intro and get started for the podcast side because they have not joined us just yet. So let's do that real quick.
The Dark Tower by Stephen King. The man in black fled across the desert, and the gunslinger followed. Go then. There are other worlds than these. Death, but not for you, gunslinger. It's time we had our own palaver, I think, and it's going to take a while.
And yet, dauntless, the slug horn to my lips I set, and blew. Child Roland, to the Dark Tower came.
We are content, one from many. Let the palaver begin.
Hello and welcome to Dark Tower Palaver episode, roundtable number 148. I am Tad, here hosting as always, ready to dive on into the first episode of March, which is absolute insanity to me. I can't believe we're already that far in. It feels like it should still be late January to me. It doesn't help that it felt like spring here in Utah for a while, and now we're catching up on the winter weather, so that probably makes it feel a little bit more like January than it should. We're here for episode number 148 of Dark Tower Palaver's Roundtable series. And so let's go ahead and dive into the intro stuff. I mentioned before starting the podcast side that we have the March Insanity Tournament going. In fact, round one just ended today, or actually last night, technically at midnight. So today round two is started. So let's go ahead and we'll cover it in depth here in the Palaver section at the end. So let's go ahead and dive on into the introduction stuff first. First of all, if you've not finished the 7 primary books of the Dark Tower series, this is not a safe podcast episode for you. We do the book club episodes to be safe for folks that have not finished the entire series. But in the roundtable episodes, we spoil freely of all things. That could be in the chat, that can be me talking, that can be stuff we cover, whatever. Any number of ways that things can get spoiled. So if you haven't finished the series, I would stick to the book club episodes. We do have a spoiler section in those episodes that it's at the very end, but I make it abundantly clear both visually if you're watching or audibly if you're only listening. And I'll warn you before I get into that section when we're on those episodes. So there's no, with those, like 99% of those episodes are spoiler free. We stay where we're at or before. We never jump ahead in the mass part of the discussion. But in these episodes, all things are on the table when it comes to spoilers. Next up, if you want to find the show, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, stream us on Spotify or Amazon Music, Audible, or any podcasting service of your choice. If you could subscribe, rate, and review us on those, we would definitely appreciate that. I'm not going to necessarily say that there's a homicidal train holding me hostage unless we get subscribes, ratings, and reviews, but because that would be foolish to say, of course, and I am blinking heavily for no reason whatsoever. And then if you want to join the show live, and be part of the live stream chat, You can do that over here at youtube.com/darktowerpalaver. And along with that, you can join live, be part of the discussion here in the chat, or you can watch old episodes if you want to catch up. Been doing the YouTube thing for a number of years now, so you can find a lot of episodes, I think dating back into the 60s, I think, roundtable number 60-ish something. I don't remember exactly, but it's been a while, so there's a lot of episodes on there if you want to go and look at the back catalog stuff as well as YouTube shorts. Like shorter, not shorts, because that's their name for the ripoff of TikTok. But shorter YouTube videos that I create. Generally speaking, one of the heavier times that I do these is March. I'll do short little episodes, kind of recapping the end of every round of the March Insanity Tournament. I am actually going to forgo that for this one because it just so happens serendipitously to fall where we have this episode today when the first round just ended. So I'm just going to cover it in the Palaver section of this episode, rather than doing a short. I don't think the first round one is usually that short of a video anyway, because we want to talk through everything that happened, and then we want to talk about the next round. That always ended up being the longest video of the set. So we'll just cover that here. And then if you on the YouTube side, if you want to like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications, liking the video helps keep Homicidal Trains happy. Subscribing keeps you connected to what we're doing. I post text updates and stuff on there if there's things that need to be conveyed to you guys. If I have to change anything, I'll always change on YouTube the scheduling. I always try to keep at least around a month's worth of episodes scheduled out in advance, so that will show you when you look at that if you're somewhere else on time zone wise from me, which is likely, or even if you're across the country over whichever sea, over in Australia or over in Europe. You can go and look at the YouTube. It'll show your time for when we do the live streams, because that's the wonderful thing about the internet is it'll adapt the time to where you're at, not just show my time all the time. So that's nice. And then the ringing the bell for notifications, I'll let you know when we go live. If there is any kind of change, I'll try to alert you on there, as well as social media. But if you do end up missing it, the notifications is always a good notifier. If it's like, oh shit, they shouldn't be recording this week, it should be next week or whatever type thing. But sometimes shows do have to get moved around. And then if you want to find the show notes, as well as the area where you can vote on the March Insanity stuff, you can find that over at darktowerpalaver.com. We have all things there, like the questions for new listeners. There is, all the show notes for all the episodes. For like this episode, for instance, I'll have show notes. All the stuff we covered today, article-wise, I'll recap the article and whatnot. But I'll post the link there if you want to go read the actual article in its entirety, as well as, like I said, there's also the question for new listeners. If you are a new listener, I say welcome to the extended quartet. And if the books have taught us anything, a new member of a quartet, the best way for them to introduce themselves is to tell their story. And we have a set of questions that we have cultivated over the years that allows people to kind of introduce themselves both as a Stephen King fan and as a Dark Tower fan. So answer one of those questions, answer all those questions, or anywhere in between. If you want to send an introductory email, that's the best questions we found to kind of introduce yourself. And then if you want to support the show, you can do that at patreon.com/darktowerpalaver. With that, you get access to our 24/7 Discord server. Chat with us in between shows and stuff. Peter is still in there as well. We can always send some emojis to him over there. As well as we have monthly hangouts. I just dropped one, I think it was about a week ago. I finally got it posted, where I went through and watched and did kind of a watch along with the Dead Zone, which is maybe serendipitous to some news up in this episode. So then if you want to contact the show, you can do that in a number of ways. If you want to email the show, you can do that at show@darktowerpalaver.com. Welcome emails of any kind. If you can't join us live, we've been doing emails for the entire 8+ year run of the show. That we've always wanted the listeners to have a big part of the conversation, and that has always been the way to do it up until we started doing these live streams. The live streams, obviously, there's people that can chat with us live during the show, which is awesome. But if that is not something you can do, the email is always a wonderful way to contact the show. Then if you want to find us on social media, facebook.com/darktowerpalaver, on Twitter @darktowerpod. Again, that's at darktowerpod, which is POD. Back in the day when we signed up for Twitter, Dark Tower Palaver was a couple characters too long for what they allowed. So Dark Tower Pod is the Twitter handle. And then Instagram at Dark Tower Palaver, all one word. And then Blue Sky is at darktowerpalaver.bsky.social. Very clunky, but you can find us over there. I am trying to make sure to be more active on there as well. It is starting to, as they've been updating stuff over time, it's been getting more and more looking and feeling like Twitter, but without, nothing but ads for crypto, ED pills, and sex toys, like it is now that the leadership at Twitter has ostracized advertising of basically every kind except for the bottom of the barrel stuff. So that is the intro stuff. Like I said, I already mentioned we're going to talk March Insanity in the Palaver section, so let's go ahead and dive into the news. Let's see. I think we got some people in the chat. Nobody's chatted yet, but maybe everyone's just listening. If you want to chat along, you definitely can as well. But let's go ahead and dive on into the news. First off, we got some Mike Flanagan updates. Nothing as grand as we would like, such as a confirmation of a Dark Tower series being signed with a studio. But Mike, let's look at this one here. The headline is Mike Flanagan already has a favorite scene in his upcoming Dark Tower TV show based on Stephen King's books. And this is by Graham McMillan from the Popverse on March 3rd, 2024. Agamorphy has sent an ear emoji. I always appreciate that because even in spirit, it's a torment to Peter that it's an emoji. But it does also tell me that, yeah, it sounds like you're listening, maybe not able to chat as much. That's good. At least thank you for the that indicator there. It always makes me nervous when it shows people in the chat, but nobody's chatting. It makes me wonder if there was something wrong technically. But that's good that you sent a chat. Now I know that the chat is working totally fine. All right, so diving on in here, Mike Flanagan was recently with Kate Siegel at Emerald City Comic Con 2024 in sunny Seattle. What's funny is every time I hear about some of these things, I always think to myself the active listeners that we've had over the years that have emailed or have been in the chat and stuff, and I always kind of track who we know from where. I'm not sure if we've ever had anybody actually reach out to us from Seattle. Now, if you have done it in the entire 8.5 whatever years that we've been doing this show, I do apologize that I have forgotten, but I do have a limited memory at times, but I just don't recall Seattle being one that people have emailed from. But I always do think of that, though, whenever I see news articles or whatever, or Comic-Con type things like this. It always makes me think, like, oh, who do we know up there, or there, or over there, down there, wherever. And yeah, Seattle, it's always interesting to me when we have these bigger cities that we haven't necessarily had anyone chime in from. Although if I look at the whole stat thing, it shows people from all over the place. So maybe people just listen and don't engage. But diving in further here, Mike was asked if there was any particular scene from the Dark Tower series that he couldn't wait to bring to screen. In his answer, he told the audience beforehand that he was working very, very hard to avoid spoilers. And then he said, quote, very late in the story, there's a scene that takes place in a forest where a character is being buried. And there's a eulogy even given that made me cry the first time I read it. And that's the end of the quote. It says, so much so, in fact, he then talked about his copy of the book being tear-stained because of the scene. And then another quote here, quote, that one speech just killed me, and I cannot wait for that. So that's really exciting. I mean, I think we all know here at Dark Tower Palaver, especially now that we are well beyond the spoiler warning, I think we all know exactly what scene he's talking about, and I might have an excerpt to read in just a minute. But yeah, we all know what he's talking about there. But what excites me about that is, and I have no, delusions that he's actually written that far into the series. That's pretty much going to be the very end, right? That's going to be in like the fifth. If he has his 5 seasons plus 2 standalone movies, that'll probably be in the 5th season. So there's no chance in hell that he's got scripts written that far out. But it is pretty cool that he's thinking that far ahead, and he's not just thinking like, oh, I can't wait for the opening line, or I can't wait for the Massacre of Tull. It's not something that's kind of early on that he's probably already written, or even something that's a little bit closer to being written, like maybe Blaine the Mono, or at Talitha at River Crossing. Nothing like that. No, he's talking literally the final stretch of the story, which is really cool. And it's also interesting to see that insight from him, because I don't know. I mean, we've heard him talk very lovingly about the series, but I don't know that we've necessarily had full on reveals as to like his feelings at specific parts of the book. Like my dream is has always been, if we were able to get Mike on this show, of course I would never want to like bamboozle him and try to like get information from him about the show. I would just want to like pick his brain as a Dark Tower fan. That's what would interest me personally as a Dark Tower fan and podcaster. So that's the kind of stuff that intrigues me. So it's kind of cool to hear his reaction to that scene. And then we move over to Kate. Kate was asked if there was a particular role in the Dark Tower that she wanted to play, and she answered, quote, I would like to play lots and lots and lots of different people in the tower. I would like to be the voice of the train, and then it says in parentheses, Blaine the Mono. I'd like to be Shardik the Bear. Lots of people. So that's very interesting. Obviously, those aren't people. Those are both cybernetic creatures. One's robotic completely. The other one is more of like an android. But yeah, it's very, very, and a very interesting thing. Definitely neither of the things I would pick for her. I've already heard people debating that her in makeup would be very interesting to see her play a Rhea of the Coos. There's any number of things that she could play. The hard part about this series, again, we've talked about it, especially for a female actor, is just none of the roles are that extensive, right? Except for Susanna. She's probably too old to play Susan. You got like Allie in book 1, but again, that's like then you don't ever see her again. You've got Roland's mom, which you might have a little bit in the first season if they do the flashbacks. If they don't do the flashbacks and save those all for the season that they cover the fourth book, you have that would be a big role in one season, but not much more unless she was to do like the whole ghostly haunting of Roland, where you see her throughout as like a voice in his head, but she would be physically seen by him. I don't know. I'm just thinking like weird things you could do to like extend some roles out. And then there's obviously some roles later in the series, like Mia, any of the people of like Caliber and Sturgis. There's a number of places you could potentially find her, but none of them are necessarily extensive roles that would see her appearing throughout the series. But her answer is lots and lots of different people, and the only ones that she mentions are Blaine the Mono and Shardik the Bear. So Agamorphy says, very shrewd answer. Indeed. Very interesting. I'm glad. I tried to find if I could find actual audio of this or whatever, but all I could really find is this one place that covered this I would assume it was a panel at Emerald City Comic Con 2024. I really wish I could have found a video of the whole event or audio of it, because like again, for us that want to hear every morsel, I'm not as big a fan of articles that are just recapping what was said or whatever. Like give me every word, I want to hear their tones, their intonations. I want to hear it all and overanalyze it all. But back to Mike's answer, I do have the section that he is talking about, so I wanted to read that because it is a beautiful section. Apologies if this does get a little tear jerky for some people, but this is the section that he was alluding to, and this is all a quote from the book. Time flies, Neil's call, life passes, so hear my prayer. Birth is nothing but death begun, so hear my prayer. Death is speechless, so hear my speech. The words drift away into the haze of green and gold. Roland let them then set upon the rest. He spoke more quickly now. This is Jake, who served his Ka and his Tet. Say true. May the forgiving glance of Samana heal his heart. Say please. May the arms of Gan raise him from the darkness of this earth. Say please. Surround him, Gan, with light. Fill him, Chloe, with strength. If he thirsts, give him water in the clearing. If he is hungry, give him food in the clearing. May his life on this earth and the pain of his passing become a dream to his waking soul, and let his eyes fall upon every lovely sight. Let him find the friends that were lost to him. Let everyone whose name he calls call his in return. This is Jake, who lived well, loved his own, and died as Ka would have it. Each man owes a death. This is Jake. Give him peace. He knelt a moment longer with his hand clasped between his knees, thinking he had not understood the true power of sorrow nor the pain of regret until this moment. I cannot bear to let him go, and that's in parentheses, so that's just an internal thought. But once again, that cruel paradox: if he didn't, the sacrifice was in vain. Roland opened his eyes and said, "Goodbye, Jake. I love you, dear." Then closed the blue hood around the boy's face against the rain of earth that must follow. So, yeah, definitely. I mean, I got chills a number of times reading that. Certainly a very heart pulling on the heartstrings, a very heavy scene for sure. And it's very, very cool to hear Mike give some insight as to, one, that he looks forward to filming, but also kind of telling us how he felt as a reader reading that. Still, outside of that, though, still no news from Mr. Flanagan. Although, let's see, when did I say this one was? This one was March 3rd. So it's very interesting to me because also it was actually the next day that this next article, or not even an article, this next news bit came from, because King tweeted this out. And it had a lot of Dark Tower fans wondering. I saw some speculation all across, in his responses on Twitter as well as on different, things like Reddit and stuff. But he tweeted and said, "Cause a wheel, it always comes around to the same place again." That was very interesting to me. Of course, there's any number of ways you can interpret that. I saw probably the biggest hopes from people is that maybe a Mike Flanagan announcement was imminent, or equally as exciting if maybe a Dark Tower book was on the way, another Dark Tower book. But it's just interesting because King doesn't really tweet super often about with stuff directly from his work like this. Just as one that's followed him for years and years now. This is kind of rare. I don't think he generally tweets stuff of his own like this. Like, this isn't necessarily an exact line from the book. Cause a wheel certainly is, but it always comes around to the same place again. I don't know if that's an exact quote from anywhere, but it's certainly an idea that's pretty familiar to us all. But it's very, very unique. You don't hear him, you don't see him tweeting like, the man in black fled across the desert and the gunslinger followed. You don't hear him tweeting things like that, things from The Stand or It or whatever. Sometimes he'll retweet people talking about his stuff and he'll thank them or he'll lend some insight to them. But just straight up something like this, not to mention it's very evocative, right? It makes people wonder, come around to the same place again. Does that mean a screen adaptation that's about to kick off soon? Or does that mean that you could even take that to meaning maybe there's a new book that might actually be coming around to the same place again. I mean, I don't know. There's any number of things that this could mean. That's been 5 days since this was tweeted, and there's been nothing. My initial thought process is when he tweeted this, that we'd hear something very soon within a day or two. That hasn't happened. So, very interesting to me indeed. And then Agamorphy says to the same place again, to Amazon again, which that's true because Amazon, of course, never signed the Dark Tower in total, but they did pay Glenn Mazzara to film a pilot. They paid him to write 2 scripts and to film one of the 2 scripts for a pilot. They ended up not picking it up, but they have invested a lot of money in trying to get into the Dark Tower universe. So there is something like that for sure. Like I said, it could even just mean here we are back at the beginning cycle of a new round of Dark Tower adaptations. We're 2014. I think we were already well into the developmental hell a decade ago. That eventually led us to 2017 when the movie got released. But I think that if I remember right, I remember following stuff back as late or as early as 2010, 2012. For just different iterations, different filmmakers, different actors that tried to get their heads and minds and hands around the Dark Tower series. So hopefully the time since 2017 has been our developmental hell wilderness area, and we're a little bit closer to the excitement of some news potentially on the horizon. And I don't know. I know this is just a single tweet, and we're potentially making a mountain out of a molehill or an anthill, but this is very I don't know. Like I said, this isn't like King to tweet this way. So it feels to me like this might be kind of referring to something, and it's cryptic in its nature. So it definitely has me wondering what might be on the horizon. Again, I was kind of wondering if he kind of knew something and was tweeting it, like maybe right before, like, like the next day, like, or whatever, that we'd get some kind of announcement of some kind. But again, since that was 5 days ago now, that doesn't seem to be the case. So very interesting. We'll have to keep an eye on King's Twitter and see if there's any conspiracy meme guy with the yarns all over the wall and stuff, type stuff that we need to start piecing together from King's Twitter. But this is, again, a very unique thing. I haven't really seen him tweet a whole lot like this. So pretty cool. Very intriguing. Next up, we've got... this is actually an older one a little bit, but somehow I missed it, and I will talk about that in a second, but let me just hit the headline stuff real quick. It's Venice, Nikolaj Arcel on the reteaming with Royal Affairs star Mads Mikkelsen for The Promised Land. This is by Scott Roxborough from The Hollywood Reporter on September 1st, 2023. So in the beginning here, I start off by saying this is an older article. I take full blame for missing this, as certainly this came across my inbox, as it does mention the Dark Tower, but I'm guessing what happened is I must have just saw the headline in my inbox and assumed that they just simply mentioned like Nikolaj Arcel, and then in parentheses like the Dark Tower or something like that, and then I just discarded the email and didn't actually go in and read it, which I definitely should have done. But this is interesting because this is an interview article here at the Hollywood Reporter, and it's funny. Let me also mention, so this came up on either a King or a Dark Tower subreddit of some kind, so I kind of found, somebody alluded to it, so I went and found the article and dug into it and wanted to, cover it here. Peter and I speculated pretty much since the film came out in 2017 that when the film came and went in 2017, that Nikolaj Arcel, was probably buffaloed on this production, and since he was such a big fan of the series, we assume that there's probably no way that film is exactly what he wanted to put out and what he intended to make. And I remember us even saying that at some point in the future, probably the distant future, I didn't expect it anytime soon, that he might actually come out and say something. Well, here we are again. Cry your pardon that we're finding it so late. We could have been covering this back in September, but that was my bad. But let's go ahead and dive in to what it says here. Arcel has a new film a new film coming out back in Denmark. He's and it is being pretty well received. In fact, it has actually been nominated for an Academy Award for Best International Film. One of his previous ones, I'm blanking on the name of it, and one of his last Danish films actually won an Oscar. I actually have it on my shelf, but I'm blanking on the name of it right now. So he's already won an Oscar for his international work. So this one has been nominated. We'll be finding out fairly soon if he wins. So that's kind of what this article is interviewing him about this film. I think it was already hitting the festival circuit, and it already had some buzz and stuff. So he's doing this interview with the Hollywood Reporter. They mentioned the Dark Tower a few times in comparison to this new film, kind of like, compare like, working in Denmark versus working, in Hollywood with the Dark Tower. And the first time they mention it, he doesn't take the bait. He doesn't really mention the Dark Tower. He just kind of talks about, answers the question in a way of like what it's like to make a movie in Denmark. But then the second time they bring it up, again, kind of a comparison of like doing this in Denmark versus, working in Hollywood on the Dark Tower. Then he actually kind of bites on it here. So the question was, it's a big budget for a European film, around $9 million, but still nothing near an American budget. What were the big differences in working on this project as opposed to, say, your last project, the Hollywood production, The Dark Tower? And Arcel said, quote, "There's a vast difference. The big difference is, my studio system experience has left me a bit scarred. I'll tell you directly, it wasn't that much fun. I think most people in that film really wanted to make something great. The problem was that every single person on that project wanted to make something different. There was this constant clash over what kind of film it was supposed to be, and I'm not used to that. I'd never experienced that before. Because in Denmark, for better or for worse, it's your movie. You come in, you say, I want to do this, and then nobody really interferes until you're done and it's over. And then if you fail, it's on your terms, and if you succeed, it's on your terms. It's very different. The U.S. is more," and then he kind of pauses and says, "corporate is probably the right word. A lot of people with a lot more voices." And I felt I kind of drowned in a little bit of that. It wasn't a pleasant experience for me working in that particular system. I felt like, what am I even doing here? If my voice is just one out of 80 different people who have voices on this, who have the same say that I have, what am I doing here as a director? as the director. So kind of an interesting quote here. Let me go ahead and finish up. He's got another. It breaks off and then goes into a little bit more from him. And he says, so there was a vast difference to make this film coming back home, working with my friends, my old collaborators with Mads again, having control of a movie again. On so many levels, it's been a different experience. One of the reasons for that, I think, is when you make a Danish film, nobody expects it to be a huge blockbuster. So there's not so much fear involved. We don't have a win the year with this film or anything, which means there's a lot more leeway to just do what we want to do with it. So very, very interesting stuff. So as Peter and I speculated years ago, and I wonder again, what would the movie have looked like had Arcel actually been given the free reins to do it without a million people interfering and meddling? And I think I speculated pretty much since 2017. Just because we knew the background on Arcel, he learned English so he could read The Dark Tower in its native language rather than a version that was, changed to a different language. He was a big fan of it. It just didn't feel like, whether you hate the film, whether you love the film, whether you're somewhere in between, I don't think anyone could really look at the film, even if you enjoy it, and really say that it really reflects a lot of The Dark Tower. So I think that's where I've always been kind of convinced that it really didn't have a lot to do with him. And here it is, pretty much confirming that there was a lot of hands in the cookie jar. There was too many cooks, and that's kind of what we got. When he talked about everyone had different ideas for what they wanted the film to be. Everyone is interfering. He only felt like one of 80 voices. All of that feels so true and so right to what we saw on screen, I think. It felt very disjointed. It didn't feel like it really had a voice or a vision behind it. It felt like, it felt like an amalgamation of a bunch of different people. And I don't hate the film as much as some people do. I enjoy it for what it is. It's far from the worst Stephen King film or TV series. There's been a lot of heinously bad Stephen King stuff, and this is nowhere near the worst. This is very interesting to kind of see. Also, the other thing I wanted to point out, speculation wise, this Danish film, again, it was mentioned, was done on a $9 million budget, and everything I've read about it is this film feels so much bigger than that. It feels like an achievement especially at that price point. So again, it makes me wonder, giving him the reins on Dark Tower, which we know ended up being a $66 million budget, what might have been, because it seems like I haven't seen The Promised Land, but I kind of, just from all the reputation I'm hearing from it, people are kind of stunned. It's kind of like Godzilla -1. People are absolutely stunned to find out what the budget on that film was when you consider what they were able to achieve on screen. And it sounds like that's what people are talking about with this. And again, since that's a $9 million budget, I can only imagine what a $66 million budget for The Dark Tower would have looked like if they would have just given Arcel the keys to the damn kingdom and let him do whatever he wanted, and just funded him with that. Again, that sounds like an insane amount of money for him since he used a $9 million budget, but for Hollywood, that's a cheap ass movie. So I don't know, just kind of the what would have been, the things that we'll never know, but it does make me wonder, just now being able to see the reputation of his new film here, and kind of then retroactively wonder what he could have done had there not been too many cooks making the movie. So let's see. And then Agamorph says the final cut illustrates his frustration 100%, and then a disappointed or I don't know, I'm not sure the best way to explain that, straight-faced emoji. But yes, definitely my feeling about it as well. It all feels like we're seeing exactly what he's saying there. It's just cool to finally hear, kind of his insight and his view on it. I didn't think it would be like a full-on blasting people, naming people. But I wondered if at some point we'd get something like this where we finally got something from him. It's been radio silence since 2017 when the film came out, but now we finally are hearing a little bit from him on it, so that's kind of cool. So that is it for the major Dark Tower one. So now we're getting over to the Stephen King realm, which we all know is just another level of the tower. But let's go ahead and move on to the rest of the news here. The first one here is Lionsgate reportedly planning a new version of American Psycho and the Dead Zone. Of course, we're only covering this for one reason. This is by John Squires from Bloody Disgusting on February 24th, 2024. So a Hollywood Insider reported this, and I will say from my experience, this Hollywood Insider is very mixed on which of his rumors turn out to be true and which ones turn out to be nothing but horse hockey, total bullshit. So I would say take this as a grain of salt for sure. But the article recaps the story of the Dead Zone and mentions that it was adapted in 1983 by David Cronenberg. Largely, I mean, not necessarily, I wouldn't say or widely, but it's considered one of Cronenberg's best films for sure. Christopher Walken was in the leading role. It also mentions that it was adapted again in 2002, but this time for TV, starring Anthony Michael Hall. This one feels very interesting to me because I mentioned earlier in the episode that for the Patreon, I did a hangout, just dropped it on Patreon about a week ago, doing a watch along with Cronenberg's The Dead Zone. So this is very, very fresh in my mind. I'm really glad that serendipity worked out the way it did, because I feel way more I don't know. I guess I feel stronger about having this conversation than I maybe would have 2 weeks ago before rewatching it. But the Insider said Roy Lee is producing a new take on that Lionsgate is very interested in, as the studio's TV department produced the USA series that starred Anthony Michael Hall. So Lionsgate's involved, and it sounds like their TV department was the one behind the last adaptation, 2002. So they have a history with the Dead Zone. I do want to point out that Roy Lee is a pretty legendary producer, not only in horror, but also in Stephen King. I just wanted to read through his resume before we talk a little bit about the idea of a new adaptation of the Dead Zone. I think this says okay. I'll give them credit. They said the new versions of American Psycho and the Dead Zone. I like that. I hate the terms remake when it's stuff based on a book, because I don't think you're really remaking the original film so much as you're going back to the source material and giving your take on it, right? But let me talk about Roy Lee real quick, because he's a legend. So the following things are on his resume, and this is only tip of the iceberg. These are just ones that jumped out to me. He produced the Barbarian movie with Bill Skarsgård, which is incredible. Godzilla vs. Kong, The Stand 2022. 2020. I'm sorry. We won't hold that against him, because the next one makes up for it. He produced Dr. Sleep. He was a producer on both It films, on The Strangers, the Liv Tyler horror movie, The Grudge, The Ring. There are some fucking heavy-hitting horror movie stuff that this dude has. Upcoming, he is the unattached producer on the potential Tommyknockers adaptation. He's got 3 new movies coming down the pike for The Strangers. He's producing God of War, BioShock, a Hellraiser TV series, Salem's Lot. If that ever gets released, he was a producer on that. He's a producer on Welcome to Derry, and then Godzilla x Kong, The New Empire, coming out in a few weeks. So this dude has a fucking resume, not only for horror, but for big productions, and for a number of Stephen King things, good and bad. So this dude, I don't know, not a bad producer to have on board if we were to get another version of the Dead Zone. So again, having watched this very recently, I would say, I think I watched it a couple weeks ago. I only got it posted last week, but I think I watched it a week or so before even that. So, here's my thoughts about it. If they were to do a new adaptation of it, I would be open to it, because yes, Cronenberg's movie is awesome. I love it for what it is, but it does leave some stuff on the table, as well as I do think The Dead Zone might be one of my favorite Stephen King books in the entire bibliography of Stephen King. Especially when you get past, like, of course, The Stand, of course, It, of course, The Shining. I think The Dead Zone's like one of the top ones that I would think of once you removed like the absolute heavy hitters. And even then, I would even say that it might compete with some of the heavy hitters as well. So I would say more faithful to the book. Like in the book, there's more of a time when Johnny, after he has touched Stilton and seen like the dark future, he knows it for a while. He stalks, not in like a creepy way, but he stalks him to like understand his patterns. He buys a rifle, and it's all very. It feels a little bit 11/22/63. I know that's a later book, but in terms of like, there's a very, it's very intentional. There's a lot going on, whereas it feels like in the Cronenberg movie, you don't even see Stilson until an hour into the movie, and then even then, like, it just feels like it's only like the last 15 minutes that the entire Johnny plan to stop Stilson. It seems like it even formulates and gets attempted all in like the last, I think, 15-20 minutes of the movie. So it just feels like you're spending way more time with Johnny and dealing with like him and a few different things. It just feels a little bit less, I don't know, it feels lesser than the book, which isn't unusual. The books are always generally better, but I think being more faithful to the book and the spirit of the book, I think would be pretty cool. I also think with Stilson, I think a reflection, using a Stilson to reflect modern political times, at least in America, and I think even around the world. I mean, there's unfortunately been a rise of more hard, not like hard fascists, but more hardline people that are a little bit more in the fascist realm. There's been fascist governments, fascist-leaning governments elected in over across the globe. So it just feels like there's like there's a place for Stilson to be a little bit more or a little bit less like, okay, like Reagan era, like, oh, people were afraid because like Reagan was so building the military, and you get kind of this Reagan era where all the movies feel very militarized and whatever, and taking like this story, both the book and the movie, out of that. And I guess the book would have come out a little bit before Reagan, but if you take it out of that and bring it into this era to be a little bit more reflective of not just oh my god, what if fascism, but more of like hey, fascism's rising, let's kind of view that through through this Stilson character, and like the idea of like a demagogue that plays to people in different ways to manipulate them and stuff. I think Stilson's a very, very fascinating character, way more fascinating character now than he was 30 years ago, in my opinion, and I think that could be reflected in this movie. Also, and not to say that it has to be like heavy-handed politically, and that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that I think that sometimes you got certain stories that are more reflective of a time, or a story that could be better told at a certain time, right? Like I think of like some of the more dystopian stuff. Like dystopian stuff feels a little bit more you'd see more dystopian stuff happening in the last 30 something years versus back in the 50s and 60s. There wasn't as much dystopian stuff. Yes, there was like the nuclear scare, and people were worried about the end of the world, but in terms of like kind of the Running Man, the Long Walk type dystopianness is way more common now because it just is more reflective of our times. Rather than aliens coming, now it's more like society breaking down through zombies or through whatever else. Disease outbreaks like The Stand. I feel like that stuff's way more common in the more modern day, and in that way, I think like Stilson could fit a little bit more in a newer version. And then my last point that I really would want to see is more Stilson. Again, he doesn't show up till the 1 hour mark of the original adaptation. That was something I commented on when I was doing the watch along, as I was just like, dude, what the fuck, man? I'm watching the counter on the screen, and I'm like, why have we not seen Stilson yet? Like, what the fuck is going on? Then when he finally showed up, I was like, oh my god, like, look how. And I mentioned that the exact timestamp. I was like, I couldn't believe it. It's only like an hour and a half movie, but he doesn't come into it for an hour. Again, that kind of speaks to what I was saying earlier too, is it feels like conspiracy isn't the right thing. It just feels a little bit more well thought out and more conspiratorial. You might see Johnny a little bit more like Lee Harvey Oswald in the book, whereas in the movie it just felt like cool. Stilson is alluded to earlier in the movie. Certainly, I don't want to make it sound like he just pops up at the 1 hour mark and that's it. No, you see like some signs of him. You see references to him. So it's kind of like an off-screen thing, but he doesn't pop up till an hour, and then you're talking within a half hour. Everything kind of happens with him. So, it'd be interesting to see if they were to do another version of this. We'll have to have some further discussion down the road. I think some like dream casting on it and stuff would be fun. But I don't want to necessarily do that now. Maybe when they announce an actual signing and it's not just a rumor, maybe we could talk about some dream casting of the Dead Zone. That might be fun. All right. So next up, we've got the Boogeyman's David Dastmalchian, and I'm never going to be able to say that guy's name right. I feel bad. Plays Coy, providing an update about his developing Stephen King project by Eric Eisenberg from Cinema Blend on March 7th, 2024. So to recap, a number of months ago, Rob Savage, fresh off of his release of The Boogeyman, based on the Stephen King short story, teased that he was already developing his next Stephen King adaptation, one that David Dastmalchian would be reuniting with him for. So we kind of know that David Dastmalchian would be involved in this, and Rob Savage would be there. I'm excited for it. I really enjoyed The Boogeyman. I think I also think Savage is an incredibly talented filmmaker, and I can't wait to see what else we might have coming from him, in horror in general, but for Stephen King especially. So outside of that, we haven't heard any updates since then. Eric Eisenberg had a chance to interview Dastmalchian when he was promoting his upcoming film his upcoming film Late Night with the Devil, which actually looked a trailer up on that. That movie looks fucking amazing. And asked him about his next collaboration with Savage. I also want to point out, as I was reading his name, Dastmalchian, I feel like I'm what's his name, Benedict Cumberbatch with Penguin, where like there's that clip of him doing a documentary, and every single time he says Penguin, it's different than the last time, and none of them are right. That's probably the way I sound right now. I don't think I'm saying the name the same two times, let alone I bet you they're all entirely wrong. So. Unfortunately, I can't avoid the name like Benedict Cumberbatch that then refused to say penguins in interviews and stuff. So David answered and says, quote, I cannot talk about it. All I can say is that Rob and I are definitely going back into the mad laboratory together. He is not only brilliant, but he's a wonderful friend and just a great guy. We get together regularly at my house in Los Angeles and play werewolf together. He's a horror kid just like me, and a monster kid just like all of us who love this stuff. And he and I are planning something really cool. Also, I want to point out, Dastmalchian is an incredibly fucking talented dude that's been around for a long time, playing a lot of supporting characters. I would love to see him actually get some opportunities, because I feel like and especially right now in light of like Oppenheimer with Cillian Murphy, now like a full-on, seeming like a full-on leading man. I feel like Dastmalchian is exactly the same kind of actor, incredibly talented, but has played a lot of like smaller roles, and I think this dude could be a fucking like superstar actor for sure, kind of like Cillian Murphy. So I'll be interested to see what they might have here. So going on, that of course gives us nothing really to go on, but we can assume it's horror. It's Stephen King, and it is horror most likely. Based on what he's saying there, it does sound like it's gonna be horror. Not that really narrows it down much. But it also doesn't. He doesn't really mention. We don't know. Is it something that's never been adapted before? Is it a new adaptation of something that's been done previously? Is it a novel? Is it a short story? We have no idea. But it's very, very, very intriguing to me. For our part, I'm not putting it down on our board until we have an official title. But I will keep my eyes and ears open for any further updates, which I'm actually going to pop the board on, because I finally got that moved over here to this new streaming software versus just using Google Sheets. So now we got it in the beautiful Stephen King font. And yeah, everything I believe is up to date on this. I do know there's a lot of things that we haven't heard anything about for a long time. But with COVID and the strikes and everything else, I think that's just a very unique time period in film history, and I don't think that not hearing anything for a couple years on some of these projects really necessarily means anything. So I'm leaving the board as is. When we hear cancellations, I will then, delete them off. Like I believe I do think I remembered to take the From a BO8 off of there, right? Yeah, I think I took From a BO8 off there, which is good, because we got the confirmation on that they have lost the rights to that and they no longer have it. So that's no longer a thing, although we mentioned before that Mike Flanagan once lost the rights to Gerald's Game, and then later down the road was able to regain the rights and then eventually made the movie. So it isn't even to say that the folks that were trying to get it done aren't going to get it done eventually, but as of right now, they don't have the rights to it. So that's off the board. And also, I have to admit, my major mistake is, in the time we've been doing this board for a long time now, it isn't until I was transferring into this new software that I realized that we didn't have the fucking Dark Tower TV series on here. So I've added that on there, put in the number one spot on under television. So cry your pardon. I somehow forgot the goddamn Mike Flanagan Dark Tower series on our big board of upcoming adaptations. So that is the board. I have one last thing to say on this this article, though. Even though I've moved it off the screen, I'm still talking about it. Of course, I want to get into the conspiracy guy meme, which I mentioned earlier as well, and connect some dots that may not really have any connection. So I wonder if Dastmalchian is dropping any secret hints here. He talked about Savage coming to his house to play Werewolf together. Werewolf is sometimes called Mafia. It's a very, very fun party game, one that I've enjoyed playing over the years. I've never really called it Werewolf, but he does call it that. I know some people call it that, so maybe it's not, again, anything more than tinfoil hat guy to say this, but the fact that he mentions that makes me wonder, is Cycle the Werewolf getting a new adaptation? And it made me look up Silver Bullet, which is the original one. I've never actually seen Silver Bullet with Gary Busey, but as I was looking that up, I found a thing where it was Roger Ebert was talking about Silver Bullet, and he said he liked it. I think he gave it 3 out of 5 stars, but he said it felt like not only a spoof of a werewolf movie, but it felt like a spoof of all Stephen King movies. So saying that to say, even though he kind of liked it, I don't think it's very great necessarily. So I just kind of wonder, with him dropping that in there, is he dropping us some hints? What is he? Because he also says we get together regularly in my house in Los Angeles to play werewolf together. He's a horror kid just like me, and a monster kid just like all of us. So then he mentions monsters as well. I know, again, monsters in Stephen King, that doesn't really narrow it down. But monsters, mentioning the game Werewolf, which I've always called Mafia, kind of makes me wonder. Is he? My conspiracy theory is that watch, it's going to be Cycle the Werewolf. They're going to be doing a new, maybe more truer adaptation of Cycle the Werewolf. So that is my speculation by taking hints that may not even be hints whatsoever from Dastmalchian's quote, and I am going to speculate that he and Rob Savage are working together on a film for Cycle of the Werewolf. So that's awesome. Let's see. Oh, look, Hayden's in the chat. He says Dastmalchian is also a new horror movie that King says he loved. And then Hayden says Mafia is the best. Yeah, we played some games of Mafia. Yeah, the one that I think it was mentioned in this article. I saw the trailer for it. God damn it. Late Night with the Devil. Yeah, I just saw the trailer for it online not too long ago. I think somebody sent it to me too at one point. But it looks absolutely incredible. I cannot wait to see what it has in store. What the two have in store. Because again, Rob Savage, I still need to watch his older movies. Host, I believe, is one that was considered the scariest movie of all time, according to science. So I can't wait to see what he does. Boogeyman was really good. I enjoyed the Boogeyman quite a bit. So I can't wait to see what else he has in the Stephen King realm. I guess I'm trying to think like the other, like, because again, I'm fixating on Werewolf, but looking through, because when it says monster, Salem's Lot, we know that's not it. We know like The Stand or It, some of the bigger ones like that aren't going to get done again. Let's see, Cujo, that could be. I don't know how Dastmalchian would fit into that, since that's really only a couple people, and he doesn't fit either of the roles. We know Christine's already getting made by somebody else. No Pet Cemetery. The Talisman's already picked up by someone else. I'm just kind of looking through and seeing if anything else really jumps out at me that kind of fits some of those clues that may not actually be clues. Yeah, I don't know, man. I think that Cycle the Werewolf might be my favorite guess, because just kind of cycling through the overall list here, I don't see anything else that really jumps out at me and screams at me saying, hey, yes, look at this monster movie that they could very well be doing. So yeah, let's keep our eyes on that as we move forward. So next up, let's go ahead and dive on into the next one. And this one is 7 Stephen King books that should be made movies. And this is, and it's ranked 1 through 7. This is by Caroline Madden from Slash Film on February 25th, 2024. After the usual preamble of trying to convey in 100 words the legacy and impact that Stephen King has on pop culture, Caroline finally gets on to telling us that she believes there will be there's untapped stories that she would love to see adapted. I'm always interested in these because, it's always easy to fixate on the ones that we've seen a million times, or we've seen a few times or seen once or whatever. But it's always interesting to see what are the ones that people list for ones that haven't been made that they would like to see. So let's go ahead and dive on into her picks The first one she has is Later, and I freaking love this book so goddamn much. I think it just came up recently. I think somebody tweeted out that it was like the couple year birthday of Later, and King retweeted it and said like it gave like a thank you or something. It just had that book back in my mind, and I know it's a shorter book, but I think I might be going through and reading it again soon because I fucking loved this book. The only thing that pissed me off about it is I wanted it to be longer. So she says Later, Stephen King's version of The Sixth Sense, features a teenage boy named Jamie Conkle with the ability to communicate with ghosts who cannot tell lies. Blumhouse was set to produce it as a miniseries starring Lucy Liu, but there have been no updates on the project since 2022. Again, I'll pause right there and say that to me that doesn't mean that it's dead. I would still assume that that's still on track to be happening, what with COVID and then all the strikes and stuff and all that kind of stuff. I would say that in my mind, until we hear a cancellation, that's still on the docket. She says, similar to M. Night Shyamalan's acclaimed film, Later blends poignant moments of sadness, chilling gore of the ghosts' gruesome deaths, and thoughtful contemplation of our morality and connection to the dearly departed loved ones. Later also used the gritty backdrop of New York City with its corners and shadows, rich in history and hidden mysteries, to foreground a story that juxtaposes Jamie's coming of age with a contemplation of morality. But what would make the film adaptation of Later so exciting is its balance of different genres, specifically the intense emotional build a Roman narratives with the intrigue of a crime thriller. So I couldn't agree with this one more. I loved the fuck out of this book, and I would love to see another, or not another. I would love to see a adaptation of it because it fucking rocked. It was probably one of my favorite books of the last couple of years. So let's go ahead and jump on over to the next one. That she picks is let's see. I scrolled too far. There we go. Insomnia. Of course, us Dark Tower fans know and love the Insomnia story. She says, not to be confused with Christopher Nolan's compelling Alaskan mystery, Insomnia. Stephen King's novel of the same name employs the disease as a catalyst for his protagonist's connection to the supernatural. After the death of his wife, Ralph Roberts begins having bizarre and unsettling visions and wanders the streets in the middle of the night. The use of strong visual effects could make the images of his nightmares really pop on screen. Insomnia takes place in Stephen King's renowned Derry, Maine, and features references to both it and the Dark Tower. Insomnia could help expand the Derry cinematic universe, which I love the sound of that. Much like the epic It, the dense novel is over 800 pages, making a film adaptation a challenge. Nevertheless, it would be fascinating to see how a filmmaker interprets the complex inner workings of Ralph's mind, especially the blurs between reality and hallucination. So for me, my take on this one is, yes, the story's great. The audiobook sucks. It's one of the worst audiobooks I've ever listened to, but the story's incredible. The book is good. I think what is really compelling to me too is with Ralph being an older guy. Just think of all like the fucking absolute hardcore legend actors that are in that 60 to 80-year-old range that you could cast in this movie. You know, kind of like your your Robert Duvall's, your Morgan Freeman's, your Anthony Hopkins, and I mean, know Anthony has already played in the Stephen King universe. Not that negates him from being in this, but I just think of some of those like hardcore, like legendary dudes that are just wonderful actors that you could cast in this as Ralph. It's really cool to think about. Not to mention, I think we're beyond that early 2000s realm where like we saw the Hearts in Atlantis movie that took the Lowman and Yellow Coach story out of that book, but mostly washed out all the Dark Tower references. I think we're beyond that now. I think now we're seeing Dark Tower references pop up in shit that aren't even really there. Like Dr. Sleep had a number of Dark Tower references that weren't necessarily in the book. So I think we're beyond that now. So I think if we ever do see an Insomnia movie or miniseries, I think because as she was mentioning, since it's an 800-page book, maybe a miniseries would do better than a novel. But I think seeing all the Dark Tower stuff in there would be really cool. I think if you write it properly, I think you could really get some really cool evocative stuff for Dark Tower fans. I think you just need a Dark Tower fan to be involved in writing or directing. Hayden says that'd be pretty blue to resurrect Robin Williams for this film. For the longest time, I used to actually think that that Insomnia movie with Al Pacino as well, the Christopher Nolan movie, was actually based off King's book. It was years into its existing before I finally realized they were separate things. So yeah, I mean, it was well before that we started this show, but I remember, kind of being in like the early to mid aughts and kind of thinking that was actually an adaptation of King's book, when in fact it has nothing to do with it. Next one is The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. This is number 5. She says Stephen King's A Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon would be a perfect for an indie filmmaker, because the simple narrative takes place in the Appalachian wilderness and would require a very limited cast. Since the story centers on a 9-year-old girl named Trisha McFarland who is separated from her mom and brother on a hike, a film adaptation would have to rely on a phenomenal star-making child performance. 20 years ago, this certainly could have starred Dakota Fanning. Once Trisha's food and supplies dwindle, she begins to imagine having conversations with her idol, the baseball player Tom Gordon, and has strange visions of an evil lurking in the woods, which that just sounds really fun. A genre with roots dating back to The Lord of the Flies, survival horror has often included younger children, allowing the audiences to experience unsafe environments through the heartbreaking prism of their innocence. It'd be fascinating to see a director frame the foreboding woods subjectively to reflect Trisha's growing blur between reality and her imagination as her hunger and thirst creep in. A film adaptation with Chris Romero serving as producer was announced in 2019, but there has been no movement as of this publication. Once again, in the wake of COVID and the strikes and stuff, I'm not really worried that these things don't exist. I'm not going to believe that until we hear announcements that they no longer exist. Like I said, with the From a Buick 8, just recently it was announced that no, we don't have the rights for that anymore. We lost the rights to it. So in that one, we're able to firmly put it in the ground for now. Whereas I'm not going to do that for any of these others until we hear something solid. The next one here, let me find the slide. There we go. Is Revival. So it says, with Guillermo del Toro's tackling Frankenstein and Maggie Gyllenhaal reimagining The Bride of Frankenstein, it seems like the perfect time for a filmmaker to breathe life into Stephen King's electrifying version of this classic tale. I like what she did there. While not directly taking from Mary Shelley's novel, Revival melds its existential questioning of our origins and the afterlife with a Lovecraftian finale of epic proportions and scathing religious critique. Much like the finale of It with the giant spider, there is a large-scale visual nightmares that would be very difficult to pull off on screen, but very haunting if done well. Revival explores the lives of Jamie from his childhood in New England to his heroin addiction as an adult, and his stalker, Charles Jacobs, a pastor who becomes a carnival huckster and experiments with electricity after the death of his wife and child. Since the story spans the main characters' lives across decades, it would require a pair of heavyweight actors to give their intricate relationships the chilling tension it deserves. And we know that this has actually been taken on by two different filmmakers now. Josh Boone and Mike Flanagan have both tried to do Revival, and it ended up being just too expensive for both of them, just strictly because it takes place over decades. I really think this cannot be a movie. This has to be a TV show. But I just read this in the last year or so, and I fucking love this book. It's so good character-wise, but also some of the horror elements there, plus not to mention the fucking ending. Like, it could be on par with, like, The Mist, if done properly. But it's just a great one. And, of course, the ultimate what-if is if Mike Flanagan was able to have got the financing to do it, because, of course, Mike can do no wrong. And this would have been interesting to see. Josh Boone I used to love, too, but after the 2020 Stand miniseries, some luster is off of him a little bit. Although I do know he's a huge Stephen King fan, and maybe I shouldn't blame him entirely, but he was the main guy that I was excited for behind that 2020 version of The Stand, and that one broke my heart quite a bit. So Mike would have been my absolute favorite, but I do think if you were able to do this with a TV series, I think you could probably, like a mini series, I think you could probably tackle it a lot more. But yes, it would be very expensive. There's a lot of big set pieces. You also would have to recast your actors, because you probably could do one pair of adults and then just use makeup and de-aging to cover them from like young adulthood all the way through being old men. But like when you have, I guess the priest could be the same guy throughout. But the main character, you'd have to have him as a child for the early parts of the book. So you'd have to have a secondary actor to play him in a young version. But this would be an incredible one. This book was absolutely, bleak as fuck. One of the more bleaker Stephen King novels. Of course, nowhere near maybe as bleak as Pet Sematary, but bleak nonetheless. And just the Lovecraftian thing is really cool, because I just don't think we get enough Lovecraft in our film and television. So it'd be really cool to see what more what Lovecraftian shit could we get on screen? And Revival would give a great opportunity for that. Hayden says whoever makes Revival better not use shock value and conduct themselves accordingly. See, now Hayden's getting in on the electric jokes there. Let's see, going on to the next one here, and this one I don't have as much to take from my perspective because I haven't read it yet, and it's Doom McKee, but I do know that Chris from Australia has talked very highly of this book, as well as almost everyone I've talked to on this show that's read it loves it. She says Doom McKee number 3, one of the coolest aspects of Doom McKee is the Florida setting. Stephen King uses the sweltering heat, the jagged shells, the abundant foliage, and haunted ghost ships to create a striking coastal atmosphere for his spooky story. It revolves around Edgar, a wealthy contractor who loses his arms and suffers a brain injury during a worksite accident. After his wife leaves him due to his psychological instability, he rents a brick beach house on the island of Doom McKee. In another attempt to find some inner peace, he returns to his former hobby of making art. His painting becomes supernatural windows into psychic visions and unleashes an ominous force of evil. Again, I love that. It's a really inventive concept, and the focus on such a visual medium makes this story ideal for cinematic interpretation, especially when combined with the vivid tropical setting and its labyrinthian mysteries of the shore and sea. I also find this funny that this is, I know Doom McKee is a little bit later in the overall gist of things. Where is it at? Right there, 2008. Because I think that this probably would have been written in the time after King, because King lives heavily in Florida. He owns a house down there and lives down there most of the year nowadays. Of course, he still owns his house in Maine and stuff. But as he's gotten older, he's moved largely into Florida, and it makes me laugh that Doom McKee is set in Florida after King moved to Florida. We started to see Florida pop up a little bit here and there. So yeah, I'm excited to read this one. I actually think I might be reading it this year, but just based off all the reactions I've had from listeners here on this show, I would love to see what Doom McKee could bring on screen, and just that description that she gave us here sounds really cool. So that would sound fun. And again, I always love that unleashes an ominous force of evil. That sounds real fun. That could be just a fun time whenever King's involved, that kind of thing happens. Hayden says that would be a trippy film. Someone like Panos Cosmatos, who did Mandy, would kill it with this. Yeah, I think that's the fun thing too, is looking at some of the filmmakers that are very stylized, and Mandy is one that definitely comes to mind in that vein for sure. But yeah, that'd be a cool one. Next one is one we've actually talked a lot about over the years, and that one is The Long Walk. So she says it's been a while since we've seen a captivating dystopian thriller, and The Long Walk would make an excellent addition to the genre. However, it would take a skilled director to make what is, as the title implies, one long walk feel suspenseful and terrifying on screen. The Long Walk is set in the future America, overruled by a totalitarian regime that hosts an annual event forcing teenage boys to walk 4 miles per hour without stopping. 3 strikes and you're out. The last man standing wins. The prize, whatever the winner wants for the rest of their life. The Long Walk brings to mind other popular movies such as The Hunger Games or Squid Games. Audiences have a strange fascination with stories about life and death competitions for wealth and happiness. Perhaps it's because this era of economic and political instability have made it feel like even more of a dog-eat-dog kind of world. A film adaptation of The Long Walk could be truly pulse-pounding and thought-provoking viewing experience. It's apparently going to be a live-action treatment thanks to the Hunger Games director Francis Lawrence, but things are still in pre-production. Yeah, we actually just covered that one not too long ago because it was in development with the guy that did that Dracula on a boat movie, and then he during the press for that movie, he finally announced that he had lost the rights to it. And so we thought it was dead, but then it wasn't even that long ago we had an episode where we covered that the guy behind the Hunger Games movies got the rights to it and was looking to adapt it. So it seems like there's new life breathed in this one. I will admit, I've said it multiple times, I've read this one once. It didn't really do it for me, but I really think it was just the wrong book at the wrong time for me. I just don't think I was in the mood for this kind of book, and I push my way through it. I don't think it was necessarily bad. It just was not gripping me. And I really think it just had to do with the mood. I really should have probably just put it aside and come back to it at a time when I was a little bit more open to it. At some point, I'm going to reread it. I know it's beloved by a lot of people. I think it's very, very easy to see how you can make this very suspenseful and terrifying, even though it is just, you know, these boys walking for whatever. I also think they'll have to adapt it a bit. I think you're gonna have some girls involved too. I don't think that doing just boys would work as well. I think doing both would add a whole different layer of drama to it. And of course, we all know that, you know, she doesn't really put a point on it, but we know that if they fall behind for their 3 strikes and they lose their pacing of 4 miles per hour, they're eventually shot. That's one thing we've talked about. We're not sure how they're going to be able to get away with having, you know, high school age kids shot dead on screen for a 2 hour or an hour and a half movie. We'll see how that works. Or how they're able to adapt it, but it is definitely an interesting one that people long wondered, you know, how it would look on screen and how the story might be told. I think this story, even if I didn't enjoy the reading it as much, I could totally see where this would be an incredible movie and very edgier seat type stuff. Next up, we've got the last one. Yep, is Joyland #1. Carnivals depicted in, as she says, carnivals depicted in films such as Nightmare Alley and Freaks have always been mesmerizing cinematic backdrops, one that juxtaposes sparkling wonders with enigmatic oddities. It has always been a space for both joy and terror. Stephen King's Joyland is a pulpy homage to crime novels that follow a young carnival worker who hunts for the killer of a young girl brutally murdered on the haunted house ride. Her spirit still haunts the amusement park. Stephen King uses this setting to paint a colorful world with its own vernacular and a cast of quirky characters. It'd be interesting to see how a director would bring King's detailed rhythm of Midway life onto the screen, juxtaposing the jovial iconography of cotton candy and the puppy dog mascot with the twisted mystery of the fun house or Hall of Mirrors. Brings to mind the Jordan Peele's boardwalk sequence of Us. Joyland blends nostalgic warmth and the supernatural, the gritty underbelly of the fairground lifestyle. It has a thrilling climax that takes place on a swaying Ferris wheel in the middle of a raging storm that would look amazing on screen. So yeah, I actually just read this one over the course of like the last year, I think, when I went and decided to do all the hard case crimes books. I really fucking love this one, man. I didn't know what I expected from it, but I kind of just felt like going in it would be a little bit more mid, but I ended up just being blown away by this one. I do think it was a lot more, it was kind of like It, right? Where It, you know, everyone always thinks, oh, it's the clown, but it's like, no, it's a coming of age tale. This one to me felt kind of like a little bit, he's older than the kids were there. He's like closer to high school age, but it felt like kind of a coming of age, coming into like adulthood type story that just so happened to kind of be in the midst of this murder and this, you know, on this carnival with all kinds of stuff going on. So I felt like it was a very, very interesting movie. I think they probably have to turn the horror elements up a little bit more than the book may have done. But I think this could be a really good one because I really enjoyed this. I think Later was a hard case crime too. Stephen King hard case crime. I think, yeah, so it was The Colorado Kid, Joyland, and Later. So Later is certainly my favorite of the three, but Joyland is a close second. The Colorado Kid I enjoy, but nowhere near as much as these other two. So, yeah, Joyland I think would be really cool. And of course, I mean, again, like she kind of touches on it, the idea of just, you know, having a film set in a carnival, not to mention because the guy... The main characters are all carnies. Not only would you be able to be in the midst of a carnival, but imagine when it's off hours and it's dark and it's nighttime and they're in the carnival and all the lights are out and it's all shadows, and you know, suddenly it all just looks different when it's at night and it's dark, and you know, spooky sounds are coming from all over the place and pitter patter of feet all over the place and whatnot. It just seems like it'd be a really cool. Hayden's in the chat saying you know and nope, but yeah, I think it'd be really awesome. I think it could be a very tonally an interesting movie. All right, so that's that article. Let's go ahead and jump on over to the next one here, and it is the article title is TV prequel to Stephen King's It returns to Hamilton after pause by strikes. This is by Daniel Nolan from the Hamilton Spectator on March 1st, 2024, as well as the picture for the article shows us the place that they're filming, and it is in a very interesting looking building, and I can see why they're probably using it. Daniel starts off by talking about actor Taylor Page making the day of a local by going out to meet him, and they had a picture of the two. The local has his own show on cable and works for the Hamilton Tiger Cats, and was standing outside the Delta Secondary School where the film was being done, which is the picture we're looking at, with a sign reading "Hamilton loves Taylor." And then there's also a picture in the article of Taylor coming out, and she goes out and poses them, and she ended up signing his sign and stuff. It also mentions how the show they're filming is Welcome to Derry, but is falsely being called Fairview. And on this picture, you can actually see like the sign for it that says Fairview and pointing in towards the school, and it says some other stuff I can't read because it's too small on my screen to see, but you guys can probably see. But that's the fake name they're using for it, but it is indeed Welcome to Derry. Hayden says he's got to run. Great as always. It says, love that you do this. See you at the rom-com tonight. Yes, indeed. We're going to see the romantic comedy Imaginary with the lovely Chauncey, the romantic comedy starring Ryan Reynolds. So, yeah, that's going to be fun tonight, going to watch a movie such as that with Hayden. That should be a lot of fun. All right, see you, Hayden. I'll see you in a couple hours. Let's see. Taylor came out, posed with the picture, signed his sign. It mentions that Welcome to Derry is the second large-scale streaming show to return to the town after to pick up filming after stalling due to the strikes, and how Delta is playing the high school for Derry, Maine. He recaps that Welcome to Derry is set in the 1960s and tells the origin stories of Pennywise the Clown. It mentions that it is likely all interiors being shot, as he noticed no period cars out around the school. I would also speculate, in this day and age, do you really need to get a bunch of old-timey cars, or is that something you would just do digitally and remove the modern cars and replace them with old-timey cars? I bet you that's probably the new way of things, because as I'm looking at this picture that we have on screen, with the look of that school, I couldn't imagine only filming on the inside, because I mean, the inside, you could always replicate that in a studio, and it's way more convenient, but to have a building that looks like that on the outside, that's why you go out and shoot on location. So I have a feeling that we will be seeing outside. Maybe it's even only faced in a way to where you don't see cars, or they'll digitally remove the modern cars and put in older cars. It says, I guess my last note here, not a ton of information here, but it does confirm that Welcome to Derry is back, going at full steam filming. Plus, I have made no secret over the years, in the midst of all these trade websites and film blogs that we cover while doing our news, I find it refreshing to take the perspective of something that we cover from the perspective of a small town news outlet. I always find those things interesting because it's all just so I don't know. There's just something about it. It's quaint, and I enjoy it quite a bit. So that's cool. I'm looking forward to when we're going to be seeing Welcome to Derry on the streaming platform of HBO Max. Next up, we've got The Shining Opera is getting a world premiere recording. This is by Nathan Zemansky from Playbill on March 7th, 2024. So we've talked over the years about King products that have been adapted for stage, including Carrie, Misery, and The Shining, all come to mind of ones that we've talked about that have had, whether it be operas or plays or musicals made from King adaptations. Though unless you're in the right area, the chances of seeing any of these is pretty much nil. We might not be able to see The Shining Opera, but it sounds like we're actually going to be able to hear it. The article says Pantanone will release a world premiere recording of The Shining Opera by Paul Moravec and Mark Campbell, based on the novel by Stephen King. The album will be released digitally in a 2-disc physical set on April 12th. The recording is of the Lyric Opera of Kansas City 2023 production of the opera. The opera is first premiered in the Minnesota Opera in 2016. Conductor Greg Schwartz led the Kansas City Symphony and Lyric Opera of Kansas City in the performance, including the baritone Edward Parks, who sings the part of Jack Torrance. This is interesting because these stage productions are so strange in our modern era because they are just so finite in time and they're also centralized in location. So to get a taste of what these productions actually look like is pretty cool, and it's pretty rare. It's not very often that you get things like Hamilton that are so overwhelmingly successful that they tour for years and years and years. Not to mention they eventually get recorded and put on streaming services to watch. But by and large, unless you live in, in New York and you're on Broadway and watching this stuff, or if you're in one of these towns that, Minnesota or Kansas City, I guess, Minneapolis, I would assume is where Minnesota's opera is at, because of course I know Minnesota is a state. But unless you're in one of those places that did this, you would never have really had a chance to see this unless you traveled for it or whatever. So I just think it's kind of cool. It'll be very interesting to see what this looks like, what this production sounds like and feels like, that we'll get a chance to take a listen. So that is that one. Let's go ahead and jump on over next to odds and ends. We've got, let's see, the first one we got here is Linwood Barclay got an advanced copy of You Like It Darker, the upcoming new book by Stephen King coming out in May. He tweeted a review, and then King retweeted him and thanked him. Let me look at my list real quick. You Like It Darker comes out May 21st. I don't have the exact day tattooed in my brain just yet, although I probably should be getting there because that is not that far away now. It's only a couple months away before we get our new Stephen King novel, or short story collection, I believe is what it is. So Barclay said of it, quote, "The story collection will get you thinking about the nature of creativity, break your heart, make you laugh, and keep you awake at night. Wonderful stuff. May 21st release." I guess I could have just read his damn tweet. There he says it. So he tweeted that out with a picture of the You Like It Darker. Of course, that is not the cover we're going to be getting. These people that get advanced copies have very bare bones covers with no art or anything like that. That certainly won't be what you and I go home with from the bookstore if we are doing physical, or if you're doing Audible or audiobook, what you'll see on your phone or computer or whatever. King retweeted it saying, "Thanks, man, you rock." So getting excited. I think we're kind of in the I mean, like I said, we're we got all of April and then a good chunk of May left. We got most of March still too. We're only early on into March, so it's still a little bit of ways away, but still, that's only a couple months away, man. I think in my mind it still felt like 5 or 6 months away, so it's a good reminder that that's on its way. Our 2024 Stephen King release. Next up, we've got Uncle Stevie Recommends. Let's see. Let me find the where are we at here? I'm trying to think. Did sorry, I'm trying to there we go. Yes, Uncle Stevie Recommends. So the first one, I've got two of them here. The first, in this first one, he says the first 2 episodes of Constellation are just about perfect nail biting and believable. The question is whether or not it can stick the landing. So I've been hearing a lot of hype about this show from a few different places, but Stephen King seems to love it quite a bit as well. And then let me see the next one here. I just have it as like a little slideshow so I could just flip over. The next one is, okay, so this one's got a little bit of a backstory to get to the tweet that I actually have on the screen. So Gambino Iglesias tweeted, "Alas, Babylon" by Pat Frank, "Swan Song" by Robert M. McCammon, "Earth Abides" by George R. Stewart, and "The Stand" by at Stephen King, all favorites, all influential. Returning to this one now after, a very long time. My previous copy was stolen when I moved 4 years ago. Let's go. And he had a picture of The Stand. So that's the one he's talking about, but he mentioned a number of other books there. And then the Talking Scared podcast responded to him and said, "You named 4 of my very favorite post-apocalyptic stories. Can I recommend John Christopher's The Death of Grass for a post-war Brit take?" Very, very British. That is the response. And then Gambino replied and said, "These are my favorite 4, so I'll take this recommendation seriously and get on it, good sir." And then King retweeted that last Gambino tweet by saying, "You'll be glad you did. Take it from The Stand guy. Death of Grass by John Christopher, and that's all he says. So it's kind of cool to me whenever I see like these just seemingly innocuous conversations with people that King just chimes in on, because he responds to some celebrities and some friends and stuff, but to see just kind of, I know Talking Scared, he actually did a guest spot on that podcast, so not that they're strangers to him, but I just love seeing him chime in. Also, due to from Chris from Australia's recommendation, Swan Song by Robert R. McCammon. I actually bought that one. I haven't taken a dive into it yet, but I've heard it is a wonderful not even post-apocalyptic. It sounds like it's a very apocalyptic book. Kind of like In the Way of the Stand is apocalyptic and then kind of post-apocalyptic. So I have that one in my queued up in my library ready to read. But I love this idea of all these books. I might have to write them all down, because if these are ones that are kind of in the same vein as The Stand, as one that absolutely adores The Stand, these are all ones that I might have to check out. Alas Babylon by Pat Frank, Swan Song by Robert R. McCammon, Earth Abides by George R. Stewart, The Stand by Stephen King, of course, and then this new one, I don't know if it's new, but the other one added to the list, The Death of Grass by John Christopher. So not only recommended by Talking Scared, but Stephen King himself signing off on the reading of that one. So love that. And then Robert in the chat says, just imagine how many more adaptations will come out of You Like It Darker. Yeah, indeed. With If It Bleeds, we potentially might have some with the new Holly show that we discussed last episode. We know Rat was signed by what's his name? Ben Stiller. Ben Stiller signed that one. We haven't heard anything about it since that signing happened. We know Life of Chuck is coming by Mike Flanagan probably this year, maybe. And then what other book was in there? There was Rat, Life of Chuck, If It Bleeds. I believe there was one other one in that short story collection, or that novella short story, If It Bleeds. And I feel like I should fucking know the story too. No, Mr. Harrigan's Phone. So that one's already been adapted. Life of Chuck is well on its way. If It Bleeds, we'll see if it's coming as part of that new Holly thing that's being announced. And then Rat. So looking at the last one, all four of them got nabbed up for adaptation. So you're right, Robert. It'll be interesting to see what of these new short story / novella collections that are collected in this new book, which ones all turn out to be adapted. And then Robert also says Death of Grass, got to make note of that one. Yeah, me too. That was the other part of covering this. I wanted to cover it because it was cool, and it's kind of an Uncle Stevie recommends for sure. But there is also part of me that knows now I can always refer back to this notes and find the titles and author names for all these books. And it was just serendipitous that I just so happened to already have Swan Song purchased based on a discussion in the Discord with some folks, including Chris from Australia, that recommended it. So that is that section. So let's go ahead and move on now over to the Palaver section. Let's see here. Let me find the next slide. There we go. All right. So in the Palaver section, I had so ultimately I just wanted to just dive into the March Insanity that just started on March 1st. We ended up round 1 voting ended last night at midnight, and round 2 is now currently going on darktowerpalaver.com. So go ahead on over there to go and check out your voting options for this next round. Help us define the Dark Tower Palaver worst Dark Tower moment. So let's go ahead and pop it on the screen here. I will turn into a little tiny bubble here in the middle of the screen, so I'm not blocking anything, at least until the finals, and I don't know what the hell I'm going to do with myself. Yeah, let's go ahead and dive in. Like I already mentioned, the last year, at least last year, if not the year before, I was doing some shorter YouTube videos where I'd go ahead and recap these because they didn't really fall where they ended with an episode, right at hand. This year I'm going to forgo the first video, and this is going to take its place because we have an episode literally airing the day after the polls closed for round 1. So I want to cover it all here, and then I'll have short YouTube videos for the rest of the month, which I'll have. Let me actually just jump on over to find it there. let me show the dates real quick. The first round just ended. This round will go from today until the 16th, which the 16th, of course, is 7 days from today. And then we'll have, so look for a video right around then, somewhere probably on the, through the 16th. So it'll be the 17th, which is next Sunday, will probably be the day that I drop that YouTube video kind of breaking down what happened. And then we have the 17th through the 24th. The 24th is that last Sunday, so that'll be a Monday. So it'll have to be a little bit later in the day because I'll have to do it after work. But I'll do the recap for that round. And then, of course, April 1st is a Monday as well. So that'll be after work. I'll drop the final video where we recap it all because between now and then, we don't have any other roundtable episodes where we could rightly discuss this. So let's go ahead and dive on in here. Round 1 of March Insanity is in the books. Let's go ahead and look at the what results we have here. You can already kind of see the results on screen if you're watching. If you're listening, of course you don't know yet unless you've checked the website. But let's go ahead and go on through it. So recap for round 1. In the first matchup, we had Roland dropping Jake. Actually won the vote here with 62.5% of the vote, beating Crimson King's reveal, getting 37.5% of the vote. This one is actually a little bit tighter than I thought it would be. To me, I would interpret that as being that people hated the Crimson King reveal way more than I thought. This is one that I thought would be kind of a buzzsaw match. I thought that Roland dropping Jake would end up kind of obliterating the Crimson King reveal, but apparently I have underestimated just how much some people hate the Crimson King reveal. So that's kind of interesting. That was a surprise to me. I didn't expect to have as much of a tight matchup with this one. Next one, in the second matchup, Eddie's Death won handily over Susanna Leaves Roland. Eddie's Death took 76.67%. So if you rounded that up, it'd be 77%. I don't know why I didn't just round, but I guess I can just do that going forward. So let's call it 77% to 23%. Eddie's Death versus Susanna Leaving. So that was a pretty handy victory for that one there. And then next up, the next matchup, number 3, Rhea escapes versus the Tet people. The Tet leaves the people of River Crossing. This one so far is the biggest route. Rhea escapes took in 90% of the vote, whereas the Tet leaving the people of River Crossing only brought in 10% of the vote. So that was a trouncing for sure. So I think some people definitely, I mean, the fact that the Tet leaving the people of River Crossing got 10% of the vote shows there are some people that really were heartbroken by that, as I was. But I do think Rhea escaping is one that just makes us all grit our teeth and wish that horrible, horrible, horrible creature was dealt with on, I don't want to say on screen, on page. So that was a very decisive victory. Matchup number 4, though, ended up being the most decisive victory of round 1. Rhea inspects Susan versus Jake's Final Death. That was a resounding defeat. Jake's Final Death won 93% of the vote to a mere 7% for Rhea inspecting Susan. So this is Jake's Final Death. Again, I think I've told you all when we set this up, I usually take the ones that get the most nominations, and I consider those kind of the buzz saws, and I put them at each of the 4 corners. So yeah, it makes it's no surprise to me that Jake's Final Death, being one of the bone saws of this tournament, absolutely trounced Rhea's inspection of Susan. I think that would have been a way easier vote for me if we hadn't in the book club covered Rhea's inspection of Susan all of that long ago and realized just how nasty and disturbing it all was. Then next up, jumping over to the other side, I would try to point, but I don't. Oh, look, I did it right. That direction. If you're watching, matchup number 5. This one actually surprisingly ended up being the tightest of all of the brackets, the tightest matchup of all of the round 1 votes. It is Flag's Death versus Oi Laments Jake's Death. Oi Lamenting Jake's Death did win with 53% of the vote to Flag's Death getting 47% of the vote. So that is the tightest vote in the first round. I could just hear Peter somewhere shuddering or getting angry, and he doesn't know why, because Flag's Death put up such a fight against Oi Lamenting Jake's Death. But of course, I mentioned this when we set this whole bracket up, that I believe that this one is actually going to potentially. No, I didn't think it would necessarily win versus Oi lamenting Jake's death, because I think that's a rough one that's a tough one to beat. But I did kind of think that this one might be more competitive than we might give it credit for, because there's two reasons for the Flag's death. There's the people that hated it because it was anticlimactic and they wanted Flag and Roland to have some kind of showdown, and then there's the people that love Randall Flagg and just hate seeing him die. So there's two major groups, I think, that are voting for Flag's death being one of the worst Dark Tower moments for two very different reasons. So it is not at all a surprise to me that this ended up being one of the tightest matchups. Next up, matchup number 6. Oi's death got a decisive victory over the booger-eating Algociento with 79% to 21%. So that one is a pretty handy route, a handy victory, a routing of it. But I will say, Oi's death is one that, I know destroys all of us pretty much. One only. I remember when I had the button on the thing that for the Oland soundbite, and Peter forcibly made me remove it so I couldn't use it to torment everyone, because that breaks all of our hearts. So I do want to at least point out, for one that is so fucking sad and heartbreaking, the fact that booger eating Algociento stole 21% of the vote from that moment tells just how fucking reprehensible that moment is. Again, sometimes it isn't necessarily even just a win versus a loss, but like how much voting did a losing side take, and the fact that it took. I mean, to me, this one should have been like Oi's death versus almost anything. In my mind, I'd say, that's like a 95% to 5% type matchup. It would have been an absolute fucking obliteration. But the fact that this one was closer to 80-20 speaks a lot to just how fucking gross the Algociento stuff really is. Next up, matchup number 7, Roland kills his mom versus Fimolo. Fimolo, and Fumalo. Roland kills his mom, took 65% of the vote and the victory, over 35% for the triplets that a lot of people didn't seem to like. Again, this one kind of surprised me too, because I know not only were there people that the nominations for Fimolo and Fumalo were, not only there was more than I expected, but the ones that nominated them in a very, very aggressive manner. The wording people used was very. It showed me they're very, very unhappy with them. I probably should have seen that as like, okay, like this is something. But again, Roland killing his mom is pretty tragic. To take away 35% of the vote speaks to just how much some people do not like that. And then barely missing out, again, Rhea inspecting Susan and Jake's final death was the most decisive victory at 93% to 7%. Very close, in a close second, I believe. Let me just go back through. Yep, it is the second closest matchup. Matchup number 8, Patrick Falls Asleep took 10% of the vote, and Charyu Tree took 90% of the vote. So, again, Charyu Tree, bottom right corner, definitely consider this being a buzzsaw. So not a surprise that this one won, and the margin for victory and defeat there is not much of a surprise to me. 90% to 10% feels about right when Charyu Tree is going up against something like Patrick Falls Asleep. So that is round 1. Round 1 is in the books. That means we are moving into the next round, round 2. The winners of this will move on to the semifinals, and then, of course, the end of the finals, and then down to the winner of the 2024 March Insanity, which is Worst Dark Tower Moments. So looking ahead at round 2, matchup number 1, Roland drops Jake, is matching up against Eddie's Death. I already had someone hit me up on Twitter saying that that's not fair, that this matchup is already having to be voted on, and I can't remember her name, but she said that she felt that this one should have been in the final. This should have been the final matchup, not one that we're voting on in round 2. And I told her I totally agree. The tough thing with these is sometimes you end up having early matchups that are way too difficult sometimes to try to vote on, and the reason is because sometimes I've got four corners that I can keep those as far away from each other as possible. But then what ends up happening is if you've got six that are like really, really good fucking candidates, those other two I've got to place somewhere. And no matter where I place it, chances are they're going to end up running into a buzzsaw in the second round. So this happens every single year. It's anticipated. There's just no way to avoid it. So there is some of these that are like really, really, really tough matchups. And yeah, somebody already complained about this one. Not in like a bad way, but just I totally understood where she was coming from, because this one does feel like it should be much deeper into the tournament, because that's two rough moments for sure. And then matchup number 2, Rhea Escapes versus Jake's Final Death. That was let's see, Rhea escaping. Where was that one again? That was an 80, and that was a 90% win. So that is two 90%. The most decisive victory is Jake's Final Death, took 93%, and then Rhea escaping was 90%. So that is two fucking buzzsaws running into each other here. So not only is the first matchup two rough ones, but this one were two of the most decisive victories facing off against each other. So this will be an interesting one to see how this goes. And then matchup number 3, Oi's Lamenting Jake's Death is facing off with Oi's Death. This one just feels wrong to me. The fact that the two Oi things are facing off with each other is brutal, and it is sad. It is actually something I brought up a number of times over the years on the show, though, is because I always ask, like, what is worse? Well, no, I guess I usually say Jake's death. What's worse, Jake's death and the death in and of itself, or is it Oi's reaction to Jake's death? But it's kind of the same thing, though. It's like, what's more sad and what's more horrible? Oi being all depressed and sad about Jake's death, or Oi's actual death himself. Although, I don't know. I'm not going to say anything to try to sway it one way or the other. It's just, I found it very interesting that these two ended up meeting here in the next round. Matchup number 4, the final one, Roland kills his mom versus Charyu Tree. This one feels apropos as well, because Roland killing his mom and Charyu Tree are two things that happen very, very close to each other in the overall timeline. They're both basically the same Roland. This isn't like old man Roland and kid Roland. This is both like 14-year-old Roland. Very interesting. You got the two Oi things matched up. You got the two young Roland things matching up. You've got Rhea escaping and Jake's final death are both 90% vote getters. And then the really tough Roland dropping Jake versus Eddie's death just being a fucking brutal one to think about as well. So that's an interesting matchup here. So in terms of analysis, again, I'm not trying to sway any votes. I'm just going to make some educated guesses here. I believe that, let's see. I think that, Roland drops Jake was actually the top one, so that would have been one of the buzzsaws. Because it's actually interesting, because I actually might be picking an upset then. I actually think Eddie's death might potentially top Roland dropping Jake. I don't know. That's a tough one, because again, I know that Roland dropping Jake had the most nominations. That's why it's in the top left. So potentially that means it's the most popular pick. But God, Eddie's death, man. There was something about it, man. Like, not only Susanna reacting, but also there's just, to me as a reader, I just remember feeling the second he died, I was like, this is it. They're all going to start fucking dying. So there was just like a fatalistic nature in my view. Of course, Roland dropping Jake is fucking heinous and terrible as well. I mean, kid that's entire survival is relies on Roland, and he drops him to pursue the Man in Black. That's pretty fucking heartbreaking and tragic. So definitely not trying to put my finger on the scale at all. Matchup number 2, Rhea Escapes versus Jake's Final Death. Oh my God, dude. This one's another one. I don't know how the fuck, I don't know how I'm going to vote for it, let alone how everyone else is going to vote for it. Cause it's the other part of it that works here is there's different emotions. Rhea Escapes just feels like anger, it makes you just want to fucking punch a wall. Jake's Final Death, though, there's anger involved there too, right? Because especially because Roland turns it on King and blames him, because if it wasn't for him dawdling, it wouldn't have reached this point. So Jake's Final Death is somewhat laid on King as well as Roland wanted to sacrifice himself, but his body broke down because of King's injuries. So there's a lot of blame on Jake. There's some blame on Brian Smith. for being a negligent driver as well. There's all kinds of anger involved in Jake's final death as well, but I think the overarching thing is sadness, whereas the overarching thing with Rhea escaping is anger. And I think the one other thing to consider, is Rhea's escape isn't anything that's like overtly told. It isn't like, and then Rhea gets into the cart and rides away as Roland, realizes he's going to lose her. Like, honestly, for me, it wasn't even until probably around the end of the series, because I think I always thought at the end of book 4 that we would see Rhea again somehow, or Roland would tell a story about, this is when I finally found her again and destroyed her. So then when I reached the end of, I was getting toward the end of book 7, I was like, there is no fucking room for Rhea to show up at this point. So it's only then, way after the fact, that I realized that fucking piece of escaped, but I just got overwhelmingly angry, kind of in retrospect, because it's like, we never got a fucking resolution on that. So yeah, that'll be an interesting one to see. Again, when it's hard for me to decide how I'm going to vote, it makes it really hard to predict how everyone's going to vote. Agamorphy says Jake versus Eddie's death is a huge one. Lady or the Tiger. Yeah. You're looking ahead at potentially what the next matchup might be. I'll get there in a second too. And the next one, Oi's lamenting Jake's death versus Oi's death. Oh my God, man. I really don't know on this one. I mean, I have a couple things in my mind, but I don't feel like I can say them without influencing people, because I think this is going to be hard for everyone. So I don't want to spell out my reasoning of why I might vote and then have everyone follow along with that. So this one's going to be a tough one, man. I mean, oh my God, like I said, just Oland, you hear that, you see that referenced, someone types it on Reddit, or I play an audio clip of it or whatever, and it just fucking rips your heart out. But then just the way Oi acts, Oi almost doesn't speak again after Jake's death. He's hangs his head, he barely eats. Like, this it's fucking depressing, man. It's some straight up fucking where the red fern grows type stuff. So that's a rough one, man. That is a rough one. And then the last one, matchup, Roland kills his mom versus Charyu Tree. I do not think Roland kills his mom has a chance here. I think it's a great moment, or a bad moment. It's a hated moment. It's very well written, but it's one that we hate because it's fucking tragic. But Charyu Tree, man, I think I said it last week. I really wish I would have written it down. Or did I write it down? Let me go see if I can find the show notes from last episode and see if because I remember making some predictions, but I don't remember if I took them down. I did not, of course, but I do believe I said I think it was going to be Charyu Tree. I can't remember. I don't remember if I picked what the other side would be, but I think Charyu Tree might end up being the winner. That's just my opinion. I think it's one of the most fucking hard things to read in the entire series, and there is a number of hard things to read for sure. But this is a tough one, and I just think as good at being a bad moment as Roland killing his mom is, I just don't know if it could compete with Charyu Tree. So let me just go with my speculations there. So if I think Eddie's death's going to win, and then Jake's final death is going to win, that, like what Agamorphy's saying, that's going to be Eddie's death versus Jake's death in the next round, which is fucking brutal to think about comparing those two. And then I'm not going to give any reasonings or anything. I'm just going to fucking roll the dice on I don't know what I'm going to predict. I'm going to predict Oi's death just for the sake of this, but honest to God, it's a fucking coin flip for me. I could see myself going either direction on this one. So let's just say Oi's death versus Charyu Tree. That one's going to be a really hard vote too. Oh my God, yeah. This is I don't remember if I said it to the lady that sent me the tweet complaining about the matchup of Roland drops Jake and Eddie's death being a matchup already. But I remember thinking to myself, if I didn't type it, what I remember thinking to myself is, man, it does not get any easier in these tournaments. It always ends up getting harder and harder because you just weed down the best ones, just keep beating things until eventually you're in a spot like the first year where you had Cordelia Delgado versus Rhea of the Coos facing off in the finals for most hated character. It just seems like it always happens that way. So it's only going to get harder. It's kind of like the Chief Wiggum when he's got his tie caught on the hot dog roller. He says, this is only going to get worse before it gets any better. Like that's the way this poll is going to go, I think. So Very interesting. Go and get your vote in. I did put in the notes. I had some people telling me they did it anonymously instead of signing up, and I guess I should have conveyed up front, I don't care if you do it anonymously. In fact, one of the reasons I went to the place I did and did it this way is because I want it to be as easy for everyone to vote, and you could vote anonymously, and I don't even care if you vote multiple times. Just do whatever you want to do. Vote once, vote many times, whatever you want to do, but don't feel like you owe it to anyone to like sign up for fucking WordPress or whatever the fuck it is. Do it anonymously, no problem. The people that reached out to me and said, oh hey, I had to vote anonymously, it wouldn't take my password, whatever, like, totally fine. I actually more intended it for you guys to all do it anonymously. I know some people are like, oh, he probably only wants me to vote once. I accepted it years ago. There's just no really good way. I feel like even when you try to put safeguards in to like only get people one vote, it ends up, if someone really wants to cheat it, they're going to cheat it, and that just turns into a thing where then that one person that is cheating it is going to completely rig the entire thing. So it's kind of like the people that jokingly talk about pro sports or the Olympics and just say let everyone juice, let everyone use steroids, and then they'll all be equal, and it won't just be the ones that figure out the most sophisticated ways to cheat that win all the time. So and again, I'm not even saying this is cheating. Just say it's a fan vote. It's kind of like when people are like, oh, I'm up for like whatever competition, go vote for me as many times as you can. Like, that's totally fine. That's kind of the way I view it. So vote as much as you want. Do it anonymously. Totally cool. I'm totally down with that. So that it does it for this section, and pretty much the episode as well. So reminder though, let me go ahead and change the slide over there. So we got again up until you have through the 16th, which is a week from today, to vote for this round, and then the day after that I'll have the YouTube video recapping it, and then the 17th to the 24th. Then on the 25th you'll have a new YouTube video, and then on April 1st there'll be the final YouTube video that I reveal the finale. I always promise that no April Fool shenanigans will happen. It's just one of those unfortunate things when you're doing March Madness. If you're going to end on March 31st, the reveal for it is going to have to be April 1st. So I won't do any shenanigans or tomfoolery, nothing like that. I will be totally upfront and honest about the winner when we get there. So keep an eye on the YouTube channel here for those short update videos. I also want to mention and remind everyone, I guess I could have said this up top, next episode in a fortnight from now is a book club, and it is the book club. It is the Showdown at the Traveler's Rest, the March Insanity. God, what year was that? Let me pull up my March Insanity record book here. It was Best Dark Tower Moment was 2023, actually, so it was last year. The winner of that one was the Showdown at the Traveler's Rest, so we are getting to the Dark Tower Palaver voted Best Dark Tower Moment next week, or next episode, not next week. Next episode, Showdown at the Traveler's Rest. Cannot fucking wait to dive into that for the book club. Yeah, be sure to join us there. Let me go ahead and go back to this. Just I don't know, just works a little bit better than. So that that'll be the book club next episode, and then we'll be back for then we're back on schedule normal for the rest of the year, I believe. I don't have anything I know is coming up that'll throw it off, so that'll just be book club first episode, roundtable first episode, book club second episode, as we move into April, May, and on, hopefully with a Flanagan announcement coming. Man, I could feel it in my bones. I want it so bad. I was I was telling someone online, I still believe 100% that it's going to be Amazon. I don't have to get into it full bore, but I do believe that Amazon's going to be the one that ends up picking it up for two reasons. One, as mentioned earlier in the episode, they paid for the pilot for Glenn Mazzara. They didn't pick it up. They weren't happy with it, but they still spent millions of dollars to get a cast, a script, send everyone over to Europe to film that episode, and so they are interested in being in the Dark Tower business. They also have Mike Flanagan for the overall deal, so in my mind, there's no way that they're going to sign up for him and he wants to do a project that they were already interested in, and that's just not like a perfect thing where all parties are happy. So I really believe that it'll be Amazon. I'm hoping to hear some announcements. Flanagan, of course, hyped us up last year during the strike, saying that once the strike's resolved, he made it sound like essentially things will move fast and things will happen, or whatever. I can't remember the exact wording he used, but still it gave us the impression that the strike was the thing that was really standing in the way of some serious forward progress. Of course, he is wrapping up The Life of Chuck, doing the post-production on that most likely, so I'm not super worried yet, because probably finishing up on that, and then once that's kind of in the bag completely and finished, and he can put a bow on that, then I think he'll be a lot more ready to make some announcements, and whether it be castings or whether it be, hey, I got a green light from Amazon or whatever it might be. So yeah, I'm looking forward to what he has in store for us for the Dark Tower, Flanagan Dark Tower series. So but yeah, it's good stuff. That's still my prediction. And yeah, I'll cap it off by saying I think Charlie Tree is still my pick for the winner for this year. But go and vote. If you disagree with me, vote, and you could prove me wrong. There's been some upsets over the years, and I don't think we've seen any upsets yet in this one, so we'll see if any upsets are in store for us coming up in the next over the course of this next month. So let's see. Agamorph says we're all honest gunslingers here, right? Or about the vote, maybe the vote. And hey, again, to me, there is no dishonesty in voting multiple times. But yeah, that let me go ahead and hit the outro stuff real quick. Let me see if you want to see if you want to subscribe to us on any of your podcasting services of your choice. Stream us on Spotify, Audible, or Amazon Music. You could join us for live streams here at youtube.com/darktowerpalaver. If you are doing that over here, if you want to subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. Otherwise, a murderous train might eliminate me. And then if you want to find the show notes or the fan brackets for the March Insanity, go over to darktowerpalaver.com. One of the top posts should be the March Insanity. Although once I post these episodes, those will actually go above it. So just on your right-hand side on the little menu, though, there is a menu thing that says March Insanity. So you can click on that, and it'll bring you straight to the post just for March Insanity. And the top one there will be the newest thing. The ballots are live right now. Go vote for round 2. Then if you want to support the show, you can do that at patreon.com/darktowerpalaver. Like I said, we do the monthly hangouts, which I know I'm already behind on for this month. I probably should have done that this weekend. But yeah, I'll make sure to keep up on that. But that's why I always plan it for the first episode, so that way if I fall behind, I still have the second episode. It's a lot harder if I plan it for the second and then something comes up, because then I almost have no time to try to get it in. That's how we end up falling months and months behind. That's what's happened in the past. But you also get access to the Discord, where you can chat with us all the time, like where Chris recommended for me to read Swan Song. So you got all that. And then if you want to contact the show, you can reach out in any number of ways, such as email, which is show@darktowerpalaver.com. Find us on Facebook, facebook.com/darktowerpalaver. Find us on Twitter @darktowerpod, @darktowerpod. On Instagram @darktowerpalaver, all one word. And at Blue Sky is @darktowerpalaver.bsky.social. So that is all the places to find us. And I will see you guys again for Dark Tower Palaver wise. I'll see you all in a week and a day for the short update for March Insanity. But the showdown at the Traveler's Rest will be on the 23rd of this month, a fortnight from today. Really excited for that. And then if you want to join for Geekery Abides, that one will be in a few hours at let's see, what would that be, 2.5 hours from now. If you want to join there, I'll see you then. If not, I'll see you in 8 days for the update, or a fortnight for the full episode. But until then, I will sign off as I always do by saying long days and pleasant nights. Bye. All right, everyone in the chat, thank y'all for joining and being part of the conversation. A lot of fun, a lot of fun stuff. A lot of Dark Tower stuff to cover this time, which I'm always happy about. A little bit of Flanagan stuff. We had Nikolaj Arcel pop back up, finally hear his side of the story a little bit. And then King throwing out some cryptic tweets. So very exciting stuff. Thank you all for being here, being part of the conversation. It's always fun. And if you're not joining me in a couple hours for Geekery Abides, I'll see you all in 8 days for the little update, which isn't live. So you won't interact with me, but you'll see me on your screen, or live fortnight from now for the Traveler's Rest showdown in Book 4, one of my favorite Dark Tower moments. Again, when I signed up for doing the book clubs back in the day, when we first started this show, there's a few things that jumped right to mind. I can't wait to get to Blaine. I can't wait to get to the showdown at Traveler's Rest. I cannot wait to get to Cancon O'Ray. So those are like the three big ones I remember just thinking of. I cannot wait to get to those. So here we are. One of them is already in the books. We have already encountered and defeated Blaine. We are now moving on to the showdown at the Traveler's Rest. And of course, Cancon O'Ray is a long, long time in the future. But yeah, see y'all later. Long days and pleasant nights. Thanks, Agamorphy, Robert. I know Hayden already peaced out. And everyone that was silently watching, listening along, because I know they were there if YouTube wasn't lying to me on the numbers, because there were some numbers that didn't equate to everyone that was chatting, which is totally fine. If you want to just listen, that's totally cool too. But I'll see y'all in a while.